the recording. Yes, the recording is started. Yeah. So last session we were talking about how to create a scenario. If you want to create a scenario outline with I have to read a payload.csv file, which is basically the data is being stored in a CSV file. So we don't want to have the data stored like this, So I don't want to have the data stored in this way of, let's say I have like a name and I have the job and I don't want to write like, say Sam and he's a typist or clerk, you know. So what's the job is, or say, George or something, and his job is like clerk. So what is happening in this case is, so we are trying to create the test data on the scenario outline by giving the details over here in the examples. So we don't want to give the examples like this. The reason is if you have many more examples, like you have the various test data. Yeah, sure. I don't have. Yeah, I have a Git link. I'll probably share it at the end, Ashwin. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So you can, if you have any questions, you can interrupt me, and then I'll try to help you on that. Yeah. Thanks. Yes. So with respect to the data, so we don't have any data stored in a CSV file, or at the moment we don't have anything. But the what I'm trying to tell you here is, last session, we have seen that we don't want to store the data here because if the number of the data sets grown, if they grow very big, let's say you have like two data sets, that's fine. But what if you have like greater than 10? And you have a huge scenario outline, which we don't wanted to have, it may lose readability, or you may not like to look at the data. So if you want to maintain, or if you want to manage the data, is the better way I would probably recommend is to go at the testdata.csv file, wherein I store the same amount of data over here. So let's say I have a name like name and job, and I just given some names, some fictitious names like Captain America, and the job is like superhero, Hulk, superhero, and man is also superhero. Now, if I want to create a user with these, the data which I mentioned, instead of maintaining like this one, I comment that now I will allow the karate, the karate API framework to go read this scenario outline, or to read this tested.csv file and fetch me the data, and create a post method, or run a post, and see that the response of job is the new job what I'm looking for. Now, what is happening here is, I'll just try to recall, what is this all about, the DSL thing is in karate. We have a URL, and this is what the base URL. So the base URL is given in this in the config.js file. So what do we have in the config.js file is, we have like environment specific configuration. So we have an environment specific configuration like a dev and QA and end-to-end or stage. Let's say you have various types of environment, you can configure it the way you want it. So there is one global object called config, which is available in global scope. So anyone can use this, um, this config object, and you can directly refer this base URL. You don't have to call config.base URL in karate in a feature file, but you can just call the base URL just like that. Now, if you look at this URL, you have https dev-reqres.in. This is a URL which I'm going to connect, or this is a URL which I'm going to hit this endpoint. So that is what we gave it over here. We say star URL base URL. So this is a Gherkin, or this is a Karate DSL syntax, which learns that there is a URL, and which is a base URL which stores in the global scope. The Karate goes and check whether this URL is available in global scope. The moment it is available, it tries to assign this value to the URL, and this is also in global space. Now, what you have over here is you have something called given path. So the path is like, okay, I have a URL, I have a resource endpoint, and I'm trying to append the path. So in a typical URI, you have a scheme, you have a domain, we have a port, and we have the path as well. So this is the path we are trying to mention. Given, when you have a URL, just append this path, and go look at this particular API and uses. And after that, we are saying, okay, there is a new job is equal to, this is I'll come to this, there's a conditional statement. I'll probably come to that in a minute. But after that, what we're looking at is we are saying something called request. So the request is pretty straightforward. We're saying there is a request called name, and it takes a variable like name and getting a value from as a name from here. And there is something called new job, and we are trying to just print this test data, how we wanted to see the payload. Like, we really want to confirm that the test data is going in the format what we wanted. Then we make a post call. Then we're checking whether the status is 201 or 202 or 200. And at the end, we're doing a bit of assertion. This assertion indicates here is in a response object, I wanted to check the job is equal to the job which I gave it in my data. So don't get confused with these, the one which I'm highlighting. So as I said earlier is I do not want to maintain the data in the example section. The reason is it may lack readability. You may have like 100 rows of data. I do not want to give 100 rows of data in the example file. As per the Cucumber standards or the Cucumber JVM or Cucumber BDD framework, it is called as an anti-pattern. So, but that's okay. But in terms of Karate DSL, it's okay to to allow the data to flow from an external file. Why do they call it an anti-pattern in Cucumber framework is so the DSL, not the DSL, the feature file itself is everything. Everything in the sense you have all the details for your feature or for your test to run or for your test to explain to someone else. So let's say if I maintain the data in an external file, you're basically deviating from an actual feature file. The purpose of a feature file to have the data, to have the details about the feature, the behavior, the data and everything. But when it comes to karate, we do a little bit of deviation, a bit of digression from the traditional Cucumber BDD. It's not a big deal, but it's just for us to have your test very simplified and improves readability. So that is the reason instead of storing the data over here, we are telling the Karate DSL to go read this file. And with the syntax, or the syntax is pretty much like read. Read is a keyword, and just we give the read keyword and we are telling that go look at this data.csv file which sits in the test data folder. So that is what we have it over here. Now I don't want this, so I'll basically delete this. Now I save it. I'm done with this. Now if you look at it, it looks very neat. We have only payload, we have only the read is a keyword which will read the data, and it will, and the Karate API framework will or load this CSV file and will have the name and the new job stored globally. So one thing you need to pay attention over here is, let's say if you look at this CSV file, you have a name and job. Okay, this is a column headers. Assume that this is not assume, this is actually a column header. But if you look at this as a column name, you have a value called Captain America and the job is superhero. Now, if you go back to the outline, what we're saying is here there is something called name and there is something called new job. Okay, so the new job is a new is a definition, is a new variable I'm giving it over here. So what this statement is meant here is it's basically a conditional statement I'm doing. So many people, some of the folks which I'm working with, when we indicate karate, when we suggest karate, somebody says that okay, no, I don't want to because there is no conditional statements where I can probably put some conditions saying that okay, when I interact, when I hit a specific element or when I hit a specific string, I wanted to do a bit of modification to the runtime data. So with some of the frameworks, it may be possible. With Karate, definitely possible. It's very, very easy. So this is like if we are using something like ternary operators. It's pretty straightforward. Ternary operators, we give a true condition. If it is true, do this. If not, just give the same old value. So what I said earlier is you pay attention to these variables called name and job, or name and job here. So if you go back to the CSV file, we have name and job, the same thing. Now if you go to the feature file, we have job over here and we have a name over here. So if you see another interesting thing over here, we call it as a hash, and inside a hash, we have a parentheses, open and close parentheses, and inside that we have a name. So this is called as an embedded expression. So we call generally like this is an embedded expression, and this is you can probably read about it on the Karate API documentation. So it's pretty well written about this embedded expression, but we generally call it as an embedded expression. So that means when you read data from an external file, or from even from a variable, or even if you read from a background step, you can refer the variable like this. You can still remove this and refer it, but sometimes you may probably get confused of what it's all about. So it just for the improve the readability, I'll give like this. Now this is hash and name, and this is a new job. So what is this new job is all about? Now, what we are saying here is there is a name is a column. Go look at the name. It looks at the name and it says that there is something called Black Widow. Now, when you see Black Widow is a string, you have to change that to a keyword called, or you have to change the job to human superhero. So this is so we're just changing the actual job of the superhero to woman superhero, because this particular character is actually a feminine character, and because of that we are trying to change it to human superhero. So what we're trying to say over here is karate also allows you to change the data at runtime, even if you have a data stored in a specific file. Let's say you have in Java world, let's say if you come into Java world, you're reading a file, and when you read a file, you have a data, but you don't want to modify this data. You don't want to change this to like women, I don't want to change the data like women superhero over here, because I don't want to do that. I want to probably do a conditional check in my code. When I hit this specific keyword, I want to change like this one. So that is advantage, you have it in this framework. So let's go back here. Now here we say when you encounter this name, you return women superhero, otherwise you return the job. Return as what? When you return the string, it sits in the variable called new job. And that is what we are referring over here. So we are saying when you hit this condition is successful, change the job to the new job and just assign the value over here. Now, if you look at this name, you cannot give name one and you cannot do, or you cannot give any other some random name over here. Because if you give name one, there is no name one in the column. There is no name one column in the test.csv file. So that is the reason you should pay attention to these column headers. And now what we're doing over here is the same thing. We're going to print that, and we will probably, we make a post call and see how we're going to assert on the response. Now let's try to run this and see what will happen. Now it is done. It's created the 5 tests it has created, because if we go back and check here, I have I have like 4. Uh, okay, so there's something I missed to change here. Yeah. If you look at our data, let's go back to the scenario outline again. Let's open the test here, the result file, and this is what we have, post scenario outline. Now let's go back to the scenario again. So in post scenario outline, we have this is the data we read. And if you look at this is what is the create a user via HTTP post. We are saying when you hit this endpoint, this is a payload. We did not get any payload here. We go check here. We did not get any payload over here. Now again, we check, we did not get any payload. But the thing is, interestingly, it is parsed. So let's try to fix this, what is all about. So now here is Black Widow. If you say the name is Black Widow, now here I have the same thing. Now I go back and I'm saying it should be superhero, and is all good and is also fine. And I try to, there is no tested over here, and that's the reason we're having a problem. So what we need to do is here, we'll try to print the test data like this. We just copy this and paste it over here. And let's try to see now what will happen. And let's run this. Yeah. So now if you go back and refresh this, you get to see, you still don't get to see the data because this is what is the thing. So we need to store this into a variable. So let's copy that and put it in a variable like this, def new, or say payload, like this. Okay. And now we try to print this payload and see what will happen. If you go back and see the payload is actually going correctly. You see the name Hulk and superhero, it's all going correctly. But the thing is, it's not able to refer it and not able to print not able to resolve and not able to print the actual payload. So let's try to run this again and see what will happen. Before that, I will make some changes over here. I just say payload and see what's the way, how it works. Again, save it and right click and say run. Yeah. So now refresh it. So there you go. You got this the payload printing correctly. So that's another way of you can define the payload in a variable, and this is what is the def is a keyword, and you can also print it to your console and see how the payload is actually getting modified. Now there is a conditional check we given over here. What we said is when there is a black widow, I want to change the name of the job to the superhero. Now let's try to check where it happened. Now, if you look at this one, this is the same thing. So what we're saying in the ternary operator is, if it is a not black widow, just give it to the string that give the job as superhero. So that is what is happening over here. Now, if we go down, let's look at this one. We have Hulk, and we print this one. We see Black Widow, and now it is changed to the women superhero. See the power of changing your data at runtime with this framework. So if you look at this name Black Widow, we're saying if it is equal to this matches, just change it and update the payload. And if you look at the post method, the same thing is happening. It gives the name and the job, and you got the response as 201. And we're also asserting on the job. The job should be the new job. And that is what is the woman superhero. Now let's add another bit of check over here. Now we see here the ID is 704. So we all know this looks like a string, but it's actually not a string. There's actually a number. Let's say you have a test case and you need to assert why you need to assert on the response that the ID should be always a number. So let's do how to do. Let's try to solve this with this framework. Now I'm going to use something called and as a keyword, and I say match. Response is something which stores globally, and that's what we're using over here. And we're saying a response.id, and I'm saying here is equal to something like this. So when I say this ampersand number, this is like on a kind of a check. We're saying we can probably assume it as a kind of a regex thing. It's not typically regex, but this is a kind of syntax we need to say that when you get this ID, I wanted to ensure that it should be a number. So that's what we're trying to indicate. We say this embedded expression like uh, hash or pound symbol and number. When you do that, it goes and check whether the ID is number or string. Oh, it's basically should be a number, but let's see now what will happen. Okay, it's failing. You see all the tests have failed now. That's very interesting. So let's go back and check what's the issue. Now it is saying over here, it says scenario outline failed, expected an operand, but found an error. So now let's try to chain this. Yes, so let's go back to this and again, post keyword, yeah. And now let's chain this to, okay, I think it should be string. And let's try to run this again. You can also check, these verification. So let me show you over here. If you go to this matches, if you check here match, so there are like tons of validations you can do over here. So if you check, if you want to assert something on number, so let's say if you want to verify all of them a number, or you can just put an hash and you can add a condition over here. And if you want to check the number should be always a big, you can say hash and of big. And if you want to check if it is a string, there is something like this, see string. So these are the the embedded expressions which I was talking about. So in a schema, in a JSON schema, if you have a value and it's supposed to be number, you can just give like this. If you have a string, you can just give like this. If you have a regex, you can give a regex and followed by whatever the pattern you're looking for. So there are tons of the markers over here. We are not going to look at everything, but the most important thing is like Boolean, number, and string. That's something we'll probably look at it in the next in these sessions. Now we still have a failure. So why is that? Is a failure over here? Response.id is the same thing. And let's go over here and check, not this one.
Sai, Abhishek here.
Yes,
Do we
I.
need to enclose that in a single quote?
Uh,
Because in the documentation, that's what I found.
yeah, very well. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. So now you can also do that, or you can also, if let's try to do this a number and try to run this, and obviously it will fail. It's not failing. It is failing. Yes. Okay. Now let's try to make it as a string. Now it will see it is passing again. All right. So now let's look at the another, the topic which I would like to cover today is about. Okay, so last week we looked at a bit of keywords like read and read once and table. So let me go back to that. I wanted to show some interesting thing which I've tried it out the other day. So let's say I have a scenario like this. So let me pull this down. Yeah. So I have a data like this, table Avengers, and I have a name and superhero, and I give like Bruce Banner, and these are the set of records I have it over here. Now, what I'm interested here is I'm only interested to read a specific row. Let's say I wanted to know what are the names I've got over here in this table. So this is something a bit of JavaScript I've written. So it's not encouraged to read this, but it's up to you if you want to, use this and, read only a specific column like this. So what I'm doing over here is I'm sending an object called Avengers, the table name, or it's just the object called, this Avengers, and I'm going to send it to this function, a little function over here. And the function says that when you get this variable called, I or whatever, or when you get an Avengers and when you get this a counter, read the counter and get me the name of that. So when you say, when we read this object, the object looks like this pretty much. So the object, let me press F12, function F12. So the object looks like this. So when I say const avg, and you have like this, and you have like, I say, what do we have here? Yeah, name, and we have Hulk, and we have like job and superhero. And like this, we have another object. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So now when I hit this, this is what I'm getting. So this is what the data is being transformed when you see this way. This data is being transformed like this, like a JSON format. And you can read this object by, let's say if I wanted to get the first object, I would say this one. Since we have the same records, and that's the reason we get to see the same value over here. But what we're trying to say over here is you can also read a specific column by looking at this object, And you can also manipulate that, and you can also put them into a loop, and you can read only this names or what are the values you are interested over here. You can also manipulate this value. Now, if you look at one interesting thing over here is this Avengers is a word. It's something resides globally. That means, see, I'm calling a JavaScript function, but this particular word, this particular variable, is sits globally in the JavaScript world. That is in the Nash on engine perspective. So in that scope, you will have this variable, and you can directly refer that. And we're saying, get me the name. So it is basically you won't get any issues, or you won't any runtime error saying that Avengers is not defined or is not found. And that's what we're doing over here. Now, next line we're saying karate.repeat. So karate.repeat is pretty much like, if you go back to this, in the documentation over here, we can do something called repeat. So yeah, so we have like, yeah, so this is what we're doing. So we can apply some loops, but what he's saying, and as per the documentation, is it's not good to have to it's okay to use loops, but basically it's not good to use for loops. So it's not good to use the for loops within the JavaScript. Yeah, but it's your requirement. If you think that you need to use for loops, you can use it. There are some certain snippets I can show you how I've iterated a two-dimensional array using JavaScript for loops. But it's only it's avoidable. It's basically avoided. But if you think it is important for you, you can still solve it using JavaScript loops. For more information, you can look at the JavaScript Nash on engine, the API documentation. So if you see this one, this is what I'm trying to implement over here. So we say the object called Avengers, and we're saying dot length. So when you say the Avengers is an object, if you get the length, we'll have 1, 2, and 3, and iterate this 3 times, and you read this, call this function. And when we call this function, it gets the 0th index, and the 0th will pass over here, and it says this Avengers or 0.name, and it'll get me this one. Now, sorry. And we have something like, we can also manipulate a bit over here. And what we can do is we can just say like plus, and we say, how about we do like, or we just add the, or we can change it like this. Let's add an adjective. We just say this as a superhero. And first, let's see this, whether it works or not. So now let's try this. Run scenario table keyword. Okay. Now, if you look at over here, we can see the print statement. It's printing the name, and yeah, so over here. So if you see the modified table, you see Hulk, Iron Man, Captain America, and all that is getting printed over here. Okay, so these are the superheroes, and this is what these actual names of the fictitious characters, and their superheroes are forms like Hulk and Iron Man and Captain America. So that's what we're printing over here. The modified table is. But let's say I want to still further modify this. I wanted to add another adjective. So I can just say the, and plus this. And let's append this and see what will happen again. Yeah, you still see, this is another way of like, you can modify your data. So if you check over here, we still see the Hulk, the Iron Man, and the Captain America. So that's one of the interesting ways you can use this JavaScript function, and you can manipulate the data using this table keyword or a CSV keyword or any kind of keyword. Just make sure that you call this function. So this is like as simple as calling a loop, but um, but it's up to your requirement. If you think that I need to iterate the data, you can try this way, you can manipulate it. But if you don't want, you can also apply some conditional statement, which we looked at over here. Now let's look at the next part, the a bit of okay, so there is something interesting link. I will probably go there. uh, this is a very interesting link. I'll show, post it over here. If you're interested, take a look at this. Maybe what is it, chat? Yeah, thanks. Okay, yeah, so let's go here. Yeah, Now, what this link is saying is, so see, ideally we are trying, we are hitting this endpoint like, this is an endpoint we are hitting. We say request.res.in, and we hit this endpoint, we get the data, and we are doing some kind of, verification, or, we're hitting and we are testing with these open source websites. But if you're not interested to do this, what if I want to run my own server? So that is what this author, the link which I pasted. So that's what the author talks about. It's very interesting. If you have a time, just go through it. So let's try to look at it if we can, maybe in the next session, because it talks about a bit of Java interoperability. We may not be interested at this point of time because we have a lot of topics to cover today. So yeah, so interoperability, I wanted to first start with that. So let's create a new feature file here. And just create a feature file like called Java. And I'll delete some of these, and I think I delete. Yeah, and I go back. And let's look at some of the examples, or we just look at the single user. Okay, so this is what we have. Okay, and when I hit this endpoint, I get the data add, data and add like company and URL and text like that. So what we do is we will add a bit of, sorry. So we'll add some code in Java to verify some of the response schema over here. So let's go back and first let's say take this out, and we just say create a user, or instead of creating user, how about we try to, yeah, I think let's try first with getting the user. So create or fetch the user, fetch a single user instead, given path, and this is a path we have, API user and 2. And now here what we say is, let's first finish the writing the simple get, fetch a single user via get. Here we say given when method get, and then the status is 200, and we want to assert on the string. We're saying that I want to check the avatar is having a string, So where is the avatar? It's inside the data. So what we say here is response dot data dot avatar. Hey, we say it should be string. So the very first string, and let's try to run this. Okay. What's the error? Syntax error? What is that? Okay. Mass response status. Yes, this is interesting. Okay, given path, method, status 200, and that's what it is. Why it is complaining. Mismatch input S. Where is it? Input S. Hmm. This is weird.
Is it a capital S?
No, it's not capital S. It's not necessary to be a capital S. This is the syntax error input S matched input S expecting end of the line. That's weird. Okay, so let's try to. just saying a fetch base URL, and this is what we have, the base URL. And we're just saying this is what the API uses. Okay, so let's see. API, I think it says API uses, I believe. Let's see, API, yeah, uses, right? I thought so, okay. Still the same thing, send back. Yes. It's interesting. Given path uses API uses 2, and when method get then status is 200, and I'm wondering why it's complaining about this.
Probably scenario should start with small s.
Nothing of that sort. I think the problem is because of this one. So make sure that you pay attention to these things. If you have a space like this, if you try to run this, now you'll have this problem like this. Yeah, I will show you the problem. This is what is having. Now, if you take out this space and now try to run this, it should work. Yeah, it's a syntax thing. So pay attention to these stuff. You know, if you have a space like this is a space is killing, and that was the error. So yeah, that's the thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've seen this kind of weird issues. So yeah, one thing I get to see is, you know, IntelliJ should have complained that something is missing, but yeah, of course it's not. Well, that's fine. So we say response.data.id, and we're just saying it should be, you know, we have to have a string over here. So that's the thing. Yes, so let's try to run this again, or debug or run. We can do anything, it doesn't matter. We can also debug it. You need to download the source file, and you can put a breakpoint and you can debug it. So that's okay. You can do that. So expected is string, but not a string. Oh, sorry, ID, right? So we're looking at the avatar. Yeah, so avatar. Now we have a data and avatar, and just try to check this. It should be string again. In the meantime, let's create a new folder called package, and we have utils. We just say utils. And this is what the test is part. So now let's try to verify something. Let's try to fetch this value, and let's fetch this email and try to send it to the Java code. And we do a bit of a checks over here whether it has a specific domain name like request.res, req.res.in. And that is what we'll try to write over here. So let's create a Java class saying like a string util. And here we say public static void. We just say public static and just say check if validate if the string has domain. Okay. Now we just give the email, or we just instead of saying string, we just say validate email, and here we say email ID. I think we all know about Java, so I don't want to talk about Java again. So that's the thing. Yeah, now we just return null just for the sake of simplicity, just to get rid of the compilation issues. So a couple of things over here is we don't want to have all the methods in static. It's not required for us to have it in static as well. Even you can just take out the static, create an instance of this, and call this instance method. But for simplicity, let's have it a static, and we'll directly call this method. So now what we want to do is we first try to print the email ID just to see the email is coming up correctly or not. We say the email ID is the email ID. And now here we say, I wanted to check if the email ID is having or contains at the rate and req.res.in. Okay, like that. And now here we say, if it is true, then we want to return true, or else we want to return false. We make it as bool. So that's the thing. What we're going to do is just we will print this email ID, and we take this email ID and we check if it contains request.n, we return true, otherwise return false. That's all. It's not going to do anything. Just as that does a validation and sends a Boolean flag. Or we just say, is email ID contains, okay, domain. Let's make it more meaningful method. Okay, now if we are done with this method, now we go back to this particular feature. Now we are asserting that avatar is string. Now let's try to call the Java code. The way we call the Java code is like this. First, we need to create a variable called, we need to give a keyword called def, and we have to say as str util. You can give anything you wanted. And here I'm saying java.type, and I can call whatever the the class which I wanted to call, whatever I want to refer over here. So if you want to understand what is this Java type is, you can just copy this and you can go to the, a Nashon engine. So which I will probably show you a bit of Nashon engine. Yeah. If you check out, you have tons of documentation. You feel free to check over here, and you can call the java.type. So if you want to call the Java packages, you can, let's say if you access the Java classes, they give it as, Java. You need to always start with the fully qualified name. You cannot call like system.out.println. You should always start with, java.lang.system and things like that. So you cannot call just the way, the way we generally call. We assume that system is at the global scope, and you cannot do that way. So if you look at the some of the if you say the Nashon, there is an interesting documentation which I thought of showing you, but it looks like I'm not able to get that. Okay, it's fine. So let's go back here. So you can search on the Nashon engine on the Oracle docs. You'll get to know what is a java.type is all about. Now, how we wanted to call this class file. Now, if you go back to this utils, we have like string utils, and this sits inside a package called utils. You need to copy the reference. So you need to give a fully qualified name. The reason I was showing you the documentation is we cannot just call the utils string utils dot is email contains domain. So the way it works here is you need to copy the reference. You need to copy the reference, and only then you can you can just go to the call Java feature and paste it over here. Now, after that, we want to call the str util. You won't get any intelligence over here. You should know what is the method you want to call. And now you go back and you just say email contains domain. You go back and just put it over here. And now I have to give the email as well, right? So this is where is the response object we're going to use it. We say response dot, where is the email? The email is somewhere here. So let's go back to this. The email is somewhere here under the data object. Now, what we will do is response dot email, response dot data dot email, and we just send it like that. Now, fine. This is going to verify the email ID, which is whether it contains domain or not. But my interest is I want to check whether this email has a domain or not. If it is domain, return true and return false. How is it I can do validation in Java in this feature file? So what we can do here is we can either store, for simplicity, let's store the the flag like here, and we can just say here assert, and we can just say the flag should be true. Like that you can do. Now if you run this. Let's see what will happen. It's passing, so we don't have any problem. So let's look at the scenario, the HTML report. Now let's look at here, and if you expand this, it just it got some data, and we verified the it is string, and we got we call the string utils, and we check whether the string util contains a response. It has the req.rest.n. It says it found, and it says true. But we did not get anything interesting here. I was expecting that I want to see the sys output. The sys output we did not get because it only respects the data, or it only respects the statements which you print in your feature file. Now, if what we will do over here is we try to change it to false and see whether it is actually working or not. Now, if we try to run this again, it's failed. Now, why it is failed? Let's go back and check here. It says assert evaluated to false. That's all, because this is coming from the Java code. We did not specify what is that we are trying to expecting the value. So there are many more ways you can solve it, but we are just scratching the surface of calling the Java code from the Karate like this. Now, another interesting thing I want to do over here is let's debug it. That's another feature I want to talk about it. You can put a breakpoint over here. Now you go back to the call feature. Now let's try to debug this. Now it's starting up, and it should stop according to our knowledge. There you go, it stopped. Now you see the email, you see the same email, janet.weaver@request.reqrest.in, and that is what we can get to see, the debugger point, and you can start debugging and see how it works. Now you just step over, and we're saying the email contains the request.rest.in, it says true, and we are done. And now I click on F9 because I don't want to get into further debugging this compiled code. I say resume program, and you go back and it says its test is failed because of the reason where we know that because it is expecting a true, but we are sending it false. So that's another way. Now, what if I don't want it to store like this? Let's try to cut this, and I can say that match this should be true. This is another short form of doing this. Now, you can also do that. Now let's try to send some data from Java to the Karate feature file. So let's create a class called test data. Okay. And we just say now public. This time we will not use a static keyword. We'll probably use the dynamic, the instance methods. Now let's try to say string, and we say generate data, test data, and we want to return the data. So now let's try to generate the data here. So we just say, let's create some random IDs. So we want to say math.random, and we just have like, let's have this way. We have a maximum value is 99999, and we have a minimum value is 1000, 10,000, 100,000, like that. And let's generate some rand ID or rand val, and we just say like math.random into max, and I just say plus min. Okay, and now I want to basically do a cast here. I put up this, and this is what I should do. Yeah, that's it. So now we'll generate some string like what do we have over here? Let's go back to this and say we have we want to generate, if you want to create a user, what is it we need to have? So we wanted to have a name and a job. So let's create a name as Morpheus, or we just say Clark Kent. And here we assign the val as string.value of the rand val. Okay. Now we generate the data and we want to send the data to this guy. And how we want to send the data is like this. Since it's a JSON string, so I don't want to again put everything in, I'll just send this as JSON string rather than doing, or rather than using some libraries and fixing that. So I'll quickly just do this way. Let's escape this characters like that. And so this one we have like the name. Here we just say name, and this one. Then this, then this, and this. Okay. So we have a name like this. This is a name as a dynamically generating the data. And we have, we're just saying it as a leader, that's fine. And as long as we have the data correctly, it's fine. Now, let's go back to the Java feature file. And again, now we want to generate. Now, this time, when we say here, given path, the same scenario, we can use it. You don't have to create another one. You can just say API and say users. Now we got the same request. Now, this time when we say, we need to get the payload from somewhere. We need to get the payload. So we need to say def payload is equal to, now we need to create the java.type again, the same thing. Now we go back and just say copy the reference. Now copy the reference. We copy the reference. Now we just paste it over here like this. And instead of giving a payload, we just say def test data. Okay. Now we just say test data, and let's give it TD. I want to just no semicolons. Now here we just say payload. Now here we just say TD like that. And here we call this method called generate test data. I just copy that and go back and here and just say generate test data. Now we are getting an instance of test data, but we have to, we're just getting a reference of TD, but we need to create an object called the test data object, which we have it over here. And now in that, we're calling the instance method called generate test data. So that is what we're going to do over here. Now we just say like that. And now we are going to create the payload is that, and we want to make, and the request is payload. And let's see what will happen. We want to print that payload. Let's see the payload is like that. And now we just say after the print, we want to make a request. So we say when method, I'm doing a post here. And now when just say then status is 200 or 202, 201. That's it. Now let's try to run this and see what will happen. So for simplicity, I think I want to create a new scenario and just say create user via with random test data from Java. Okay. So anything I'm missing? Looks okay. Let's try to run this. Okay, wonderful. So we got the status as passed. So let's look at what is that we have done over here. Let's look at the result file. Now, if you look at this one, so this is the most interesting thing. You see the name is Clark Kent and we got a random ID called 8441157 and the name as a job leader. Now, if you go to the post call, this is the same payload we have given and we got a successful response over here. So the way, what you're trying to understand here is it's not necessary that you have to have a static keywords or a static methods. You can also create an instance of an object and call the instance methods like this. You don't have to give any semicolons, but you can just call the way that traditionally you create objects in Java world. We just say create, we ideally start like this. We say td is equal to new td.generate test data, but in karate, this is the way we should call. First, we need to acquire the reference where the reference is. Then we are telling the Java, or we are telling the JavaScript and the Nashon engine that okay, when you get the acquire this, why don't you create an object of it and call the instance method, and that's where we get it. And the moment when we call the instance method and you get the data the way we have it, the way we give it over here. So if you're interested to know, you can also put debug breakpoints and you can call from here. You can just say right click and debug, and you can put a breakpoints and you can debug and how it works. You can get the options are plenty here. So what we looked at is how we can bring in Java into Karate feature files. The options are also huge. I just only scratched the surface of it. So you can do many more things, but I would really advise you not to write Java code here because it defeats the purpose of having a Karate API framework. So why we use Java code is there are certain number of situations that where you may need to write Java code which you cannot solve certain things using Karate. For example, if I want to connect to the AWS SDK, I may not be having, or not, I don't have any methods which I can directly interact with the AWS SDK. In that case, I will probably write some Java code wherein I download the SDK. Downloading SDK is also not so complex. You have a pom.xml file. You can just go over here and you can put the dependency over here and you can just call your SDK all together and just call the code the way you traditionally write your Java code. And you do whatever the connection, fetch the data and all that, and just supply the data or call your Java methods over in your Karate. That's an interesting way of solving your API test requirements using Java and Karate. Yeah, so let's look at the other. Yeah, I think we will probably talk about the mock server in the next session, and I'll bring in this dynamic data driven features as well. It's a very simple thing. It's I can show you over here. There is a feature file which there is a repo. You can probably refer it. I've created some time back, I think some few days ago. This is all details. You can look at it. This is my public repo, so feel free to look at it. What all the feature files you have it over here. So if you see, I have a simple get post. You can run a method interoperability. If you have anything DB, how we call the DB. If you're already working in Java, if you're already working in Karate API, you can directly hop onto this DB if you have anything specific requirements on the DB, and something about GraphQL testing, which we'll talk about in the next session. So a lot of assertion techniques I'll talk, which is very interesting to know about it. You can check it out here. And very, very interesting thing is, if you have a postman collection, let's say I have a postman collection, and I want to transform the postman collection into Karate DSL feature files at runtime. That's something, there's a bit of code, not a bit of code, I think it's a lot of code it's written, it's just one method, very interesting method. You can, take a look at it and see if you wanted to transform your collection, Postman collection, into a feature files. It also writes the feature files on the fly, and you can also run it using Karate feature, Karate Runner, and you can also get to see a nice report. So feel free to take a look at it. If you're an advanced user, if you're finding it so boring, this consists what I'm talking, because I'm talking in a perspective that no one knows about karate. I may be going a bit slow, I may be going a bit faster, but if you're whatever the level you are at, if you wanted to look, look at some of the feature files, what we are writing, what we're developing, you can feel free to take a look at this repo. So I'll post it over here, and yeah. Okay, so that's all for now. We will try to wrap up today a bit early. So I'll probably stop for now and wait for some questions. If you don't have any questions, we can wrap it up. We'll continue the next call a bit detail about Karate UI automation and myths of some of the data-driven features and the one WireMock server. So such things we'll probably look at in the next session. Yeah. So open for questions. Yeah. Please feel free to ask any questions you have. Does it have any example of Selenium with Karate? No, not yet. I don't have any, a sample, but I can write something for you guys and post it. So yeah, thank you for bringing that. I'll put that Sai Naga Trisha. Yeah.
Sai, I have a question on the syntax highlighting that we faced, right? The issue
Okay.
in IntelliJ. So I was using Eclipse, and I could find out a way to fix that, because when I see that my syntax is wrong, it used to give me error.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way or plugin or something that we can configure the same thing in IntelliJ, or even it works fine in Visual Studio Code?
Okay, Visual Studio Code, we will look at as part of the UI testing. See, Visual Studio Code is also very good IDE you can use to write the feature files, but it's more helpful and it's more intuitive when you're trying to do UI testing, because that is where the debugger, which we want to look
Right,
at
right.
it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the syntax errors which you're talking about,
Mm.
so in IntelliJ, you may not get this kind of, the issues what we've seen just now, the space what you're seeing
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you make mistakes over here, you get to see, let's say
Okay. Coloring.
it'll probably transform to this way. You say it's a
Right, right,
brownish.
right.
So that indicates that there's an undefined matching step definition. So that's what it indicates.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm actually a much of Eclipse user. So when I switch to IntelliJ, it's I'm still new, but one has to get acquainted with this kind of syntax coloring and all to avoid that kind of issues, right? In IntelliJ.
Yeah. So see, I'm also coming from an Eclipse. I'm a hardcore Eclipse user. I've been using Eclipse for many years, and I recently moved to IntelliJ. The reason I moved to IntelliJ is because of the karate. Then I slowly got acquainted with IntelliJ, and I started developing projects
It's
and
quite
many.
faster though, even.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
sure.
Any other questions?
Yes, Sachin here.
Hey,
So
Sachin, hi.
see, in Eclipse, I'm unable to find archetype. So whenever I'm creating new framework of karate,
Hmm.
so I'm searching the archetype, right? Karate,
Okay.
you have created it. So in my system, I am unable to search the karate. It is showing some hardcore archetype around 8 or 10 something.
Have you tried to run
So
this command?
yeah,
Like there is a command some quick start command. Have you tried to run that from Maven?
yeah. First day you shared some command, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So same I tried,
What
but
was the error you seen?
I shared. I'm unable to
Okay, fine, no problem,
remember.
no worries. Okay, okay. So yeah, see, I would see one thing I mentioned, that is, you try to look at the as long as you have the Maven correctly configured, you can try to verify the Maven quick start. So let's say if I jump to the quick start command over here, so make sure that you remove these backward slashes and make sure that it is one command. No, you can just copy this and you can go to the text editor and you paste it like this, and so make sure that you delete them. I try to make it one command, like space, give a space, delete this, and yeah, you just give. So make sure that you delete these backslashes and you try to generate the archetype again. It should work. So I don't see any challenge over here, but it should uh, work. So I try to again, yeah, like this, and remove this one and this one. So now if you create one single command and make sure that there is no carriage written like this. So let's say if I have like this, enter, and I try to copy this command like this, you may not see the command working correctly. So copy this as a one line and just copy this as a one line and open a terminal. I'll try to clean up this and I just say Control V. So now if I press enter, it'll start creating the project. So give it a shot and see. If Maven is not recognized, then you may have some other, maybe you need to fix the Maven. So let's say if I type Maven, see, it's when I say type a Maven, it's complaining that warning build failure because I did not have any, the commands supposed to be given. And that is the reason it is complaining. Make sure the Maven is installed and see that the archetype is correct. No spell mistakes here. If you take care of everything, and I believe it should definitely work. Otherwise, you can probably, send me an email. My email ID is already posted. I'll share my email here. You can send me a screenshot. I'll try to see and I'll help you guys. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah. So if you don't have any questions, then we'll wrap up today. And thank you all for joining this session. We'll see you in the next session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sai.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.